Alright lads, I'm SAKO, but you can call me Jack. Today we're taking a look at the new premium running top tier, the American M1 KVT. I have many opinions of this tank. First, it's a copy and paste with a slight visual difference, which makes me think that Gaijin is just a bit lazy, just adding cash grabs to the game. On the other hand, it's a fairly innocuous premium. It isn't particularly powerful, and in many ways it's what a premium vehicle used to be in War Thunder. Decent, but by no means meta-changing. However, there is no doubt in my mind that the KVT is a lot weaker than some of the other Rank 6 premiums, notably the Leopard 2 Panzer Battalion, T-72 AV Terms, and the ZTZ-96A prototype. And the kicker is, with the exception of the Panzer, the two other vehicles are a lower battle rating, and all three tanks arguably have better protection and firepower. I sure am glad I spent the money on this premium. Anyway, the KVT is a rank 6 battle rating 10.3 medium tank located in the American tech tree. To get access to this tank, you're going to have to hand over $60 to the evil snail, and you'll then have to hand over the majority of your mental health, as you'll be playing with American mains. Moving on to the reward multipliers, and recently with the economy roadmap changes, they've kind of changed everything round a bit. Our RP multiplier is 2.26, this is the standard now for all of the rank 6 premiums. And they've also changed the silver line modifiers. Now all rank 6 premiums have a base of 1.9. So you can actually make decent money in this vehicle. But remember boys, if you want to make silver lines fast, just buy a naval premium, grit your teeth, press those buttons and shoot at bots, and start earning. Gaijin knows no one likes naval, so they've made the silver line multipliers massive to get people to play it. Anyway though, in the rest of this video I'm going to go over the details of this tank, how competitive it is, and compare it to some of the other vehicles. If that sounds good to you and you don't mind listening to the ramblings of a severely depressed English person, then stick around for the rest of the video. Alright lads, welcome back. Before we go any further, let's talk about the cosmetic changes. The KVT is modelled on a T80, but while you look like a terrible kid's drawing of a T80, you certainly do not have the nice thick frontal armour of a Soviet's main battle tank. I was going to play without the Viz mod equipped, as the barrels on the rear actually hinder the turret traverse, but for some reason adding all this stuff to the front of your tank actually decreases the weight by 500 kilos, giving you slightly better mobility. Speaking of which, like all of the other Abrams currently in game, the KVT is powered by the Honeywell gas turbine, producing 1,519 horsepower. Combined with the vehicle's weight of 55.7 tons as standard, or 55.2 tons with the Viz mod, our power to weight ratio of 27.3 horsepower per ton for the former, and 27.5 horsepower per ton for the latter. This gives the KVT the best power to weight ratio of all the rank 6 main battle tanks. It also has the best top speeds, both forwards and in reverse, being capable of moving at 72 km per hour going forwards and 39 km per hour in French. The mobility compares very favourably to the other big 3 rank 6 premiums. While the Leopard 2 does come close in terms of power to weight ratio and top speed, you can see that the Terms and the ZTZ are far behind the KVT when it comes to getting around the battlefield. Arguably, the KVT's biggest strength is its mobility, and as we'll see, it suffers a lot in the armour and firepower departments. But the acceleration and top speeds of this tank do give you a big advantage in the early parts of a game, when enemies haven't had time to establish themselves in strong cooldown positions. However, in the mid to late stages of a match, you will struggle to regain the initiative if your team is losing. There are several reasons for this. The first issue is survivability. While the modern Abrams tanks are considered to be highly protected against thin rounds, the early variants certainly were not. The M1 Abrams, the variant the KVT is based on, was designed to mainly counter heat effects fired by the T-62 and the T-64, not the modern thin rounds it fights at battle rating 10.3. The KVT's rather unique visual appearance also doesn't improve our protection. Part of making this tank look like a commie block main battle tank was welding fake ERE plates on the front of the turret. While this may cause people to second guess shooting this area, they provide no physical protection. We have also lost the side skirts. While this won't matter when fighting other main battle tanks, it makes life a lot easier for IFVs with low caliber weapons. When it comes to the soft factors of survivability, we have a crew of 4 men, with a driver in the hull and the other 3 in the fighting compartment. This layout of crew does make it hard to knock out in a single hit. We also have basically no vulnerable ammunition, with all of the ammunition being carried in blowout panels. We have one in the turret bustle that vents gas upwards, and another in the hull in front of the engine, which vents gas downwards. Finally, to improve the protection of this tank, we have a healthy lathering of Chobham armour on the front and sides of the turret, as well as a section in the lower frontal plate. However, this isn't backed by the depleted uranium add-on found on the later Abrams models. So this NERA is highly effective against chemical warheads, somewhat effective against the early fin rounds such as M735, but it's basically ineffective against the more modern fin rounds like 3BM42 Mango. Speaking of your armour, let's compare the armour of the KVT against the guns of the big 3. First we have the DM23 of the Leopard 2A4. At a range of 100 meters, the entire upper and lower frontal glacis are able to be penetrated, as well as the gun breech and most of the left hand side of the turret, with only the thicker right hand side being strong enough to defeat this round. Things only get worse though when we move on to the Russian and Chinese equivalents, with both of these rounds at the same 100 meter range being able to lol pen the entire frontal armour scheme of the KVT. It certainly isn't looking great, lads, and remember, this tank is a higher battle rating than both the Terms and the ZTZ, seemingly so far purely because this tank is a little bit faster. Anyway, maybe comparing this tank to 3 of the best tanks in the game is a little unfair, so what if you're up tiered against this thing and want to know how to kill it? Well, let's go over the weak spots. You can see here that this tank has 2 major frontal weak spots. The first, as you can see, is the entire turret ring. Unlike Soviet tanks which have their turret rings sunk into the hull, the Abrams design has a very visible turret ring, which is a super juicy target in a close quarter brawl. Shooting here will almost certainly destroy the turret ring, preventing the player from traversing their gun, but it won't necessarily black out their breach. Instead, the other weak spot, like many other NATO main battle tanks, is the breach itself. While nowhere near as big a target as the Leopard 2A4, the Abrams still has an easily targeted breach, which unlike the turret ring, will generally destroy the gun as well as a couple of crew members. Rest assured, no matter what tank you happen to be in when you come across the KVT, you will be able to fight it effectively, at least if you're in close range. So, how should you play this tank? If it's so weak in brawling, then I guess you should stay at longer ranges. Well, yeah, this tank and the M1 Abrams in general are kind of standoff tanks. You can't play them like the Soviets, driving into enemy positions and getting bullshit bounces. It's just not possible in this vehicle. Instead, you should use your speed to get into good early game positions and then wait for enemies to drive towards you. This works best on the more urban maps in the game. Alternatively, in the more wider rural maps, flanking is an Abrams' best friend. Try and stay hidden using terrain like the hills and tree lines, and generally snipe people at longer ranges if you can. You can also flank wide at the start of a match, and then swing inwards and catch the sides of the enemy when they aren't paying attention. This latter tactic hardly works in War Thunder though, as it relies on you actually having competent teammates. So, it's fair to say that I'm not too impressed with this tank at the minute. My $60 so far has been about as good an investment as the Lana Rhodes NFT collection. But finally, let's talk about, in my opinion, the worst part of this tank, the firepower. The original Abrams was fitted with the 105mm M68A1 cannon. The reason they didn't go for the larger 120 was mainly for the ammunition compatibility between the new Abrams and the older M60 tanks. With the US Army having tens of thousands of 105mm rounds already in stockpiles, it didn't really make sense to switch to a new caliber. The Americans did test both the British and German 120s, and they did actually add a design provision allowing for a larger gun to be fitted to the Abrams down the line. In the early 80s, that 120 armed variant went on to be known as the M1A1. However, in War Thunder, the tank we have is an early model Abrams, even lacking the advanced fin rounds developed for the tank such as M833 or the M900. So in War Thunder, the KVT's gun can be described as mediocre at best. We can carry 55 rounds of ammunition in total, However, I generally don't take more than 23 into a battle. While the Abrams can technically take a full combat load of ammunition if you want to, I see it as just tempting fate, and you generally don't need more than 15 rounds anyway, unless you're like a super good player. So around 20 rounds is my sweet spot. We also have a rare W for the KVT, and that is its reload speed. Compared to the other big three, the Abrams is a fire-spitting monster, at least when it comes to the rate of fire. With a stock crew, we can fire every 6.5 seconds, and with an ace crew, that drops down to 5 seconds. This undoubtedly gives you a massive rate of fire advantage over most of the other main battle tanks. For example, the 120mm of the Leopard 2A4 can fire every 6 seconds with an ace crew, and both the Terms and ZTZ's 125mm guns use an autoloader, giving them a constant reload speed of 7.1 seconds. This allows you to be a little aggressive if an enemy flunks their shot, as you can almost always beat their reload speed. This is a sketchy tactic however, as if you miss your shot, well, we've already covered that the enemy doesn't need to aim for your weak spots. In terms of gun handling, the KVT, like the XM1 before it, actually has a pretty good set of statistics. To be honest, I can't really criticise it too much. We have 10 degrees of gun depression and 20 degrees of elevation. We also have very good turret mobility, as I like to call it. Basically how easy it is to get your gun on target. For the Abrams, again, it's very good. Hopefully on screen you are seeing the targeting speeds for the KVT, Terms and ZTZ. With an ace crew we can rotate our turret at around 40 degrees per second. In comparison, the Russian equivalent can only manage half that speed, and the Chinese vehicle can manage a respectable 30 degrees per second. The other big W is the gun elevation speed. The KVT can elevate its gun at 24 degrees per second, whereas the Soviet and Chinese premiums can only manage 3.5 degrees per second and 5 degrees per second for the Chinese respectively. The gun handling of the KVT is very responsive, and it allows you to react very quickly to enemy tanks. Especially if you both meet with guns pointing away from each other, you will generally get your gun swung onto target before the enemy does. But because of the armor scheme, I still generally wouldn't recommend brawling in this vehicle. This is kind of where the positives end though. Let's start with our main ammunition. We can carry Heaterfest, Hesh, Smoke and 2 types of fin rounds, the best of which is the M774, an evolution of the M735 found on the XM1. This is our top round, and it is capable of penetrating 372mm of flat armor. And against armor plate at an angle of 60 degrees, that drops down to 215mm. Using this round against some of the contemporaries, as you can see, provides decent results at close range against the hull, but generally isn't strong enough to go through the thick turret cheeks. This of course can be remedied by aiming for weak spots, where your enemies don't have to aim for yours. The fin rounds of the big three can lol pen you. Again, don't brawl in this thing, as if the enemy has got more than 10 brain cells, which I grant is rare for War Thunder players, but they will have all the advantages if they do. This is without a doubt the worst round found on any of the top tier rank 6 premiums. Again, on screen you can see the main ammunition for the other 3 tanks I've mentioned in this video. All of the other fin rounds on display here not only travel much faster, making them easier to aim at long range, but they also have far more penetration capabilities, both against flat and angled armor. Again, the KVT is batter rating 10.3, whereas the Terms and the ZTZ are 10.0. So far all we've got for that 0.3 batter rating increase is a bit more mobility and improved rate of fire, whereas the other 3 vehicles have better armor and firepower. The KVT also features a laser rangefinder, as well as first generation thermals for the gunner's sight. This is similar to the thermal setup found on the Leo, but the Chinese ZTZ gets 2nd generation for its gunner, and the Terms gets 2nd gen for both its gunner and commander's sights. Generally the fire control for the Soviet and Chinese premiums are better than the Abrams. Quite ironic considering the technological lead the US Army has in real life. In game though, lacking high-res thermals does make it a pain in the balls to fire accurately in night matches, as the low resolution doesn't allow you to aim for weak spots at long range. In my opinion though, the biggest issue with this tank is the lack of a knockout punch. In my opinion, the KVT is a slightly better XM1 with only slight improvements over that premium, despite being a full batter rating higher. In real life, the KVT was based on the M1A1 Abrams with a 120mm cannon. Gaijin should have implemented this vehicle rather than a 105 Abrams. The argument against this is pretty terrible in my opinion. It would be batter rating 10.7, one step up from what we've already got at the minute. but Gaijin could have just given it the M829 round, the first version. That gives it 479mm of penetration, 8mm less than the 3BM42 Mango round. The M1A1 also has a similar armor scheme to the M1 Abrams, so there's literally no argument against my proposal. It couldn't be overpowered. It has similar armor schemes to what we already have. It has a similar gun to the Terms and the ZTZ. So I don't really know what's gone on at Gaijin headquarters. The other option to improve this, in my opinion, is adding the M833 to the KVT, which was actually the service round for the M1 Abrams throughout the Cold War. If the conflict went hot, it is this round which would have decided the fate of Europe. Gaijin again seemingly forgot about this and said fuck it, let's give them M774 and call it a day. As I'm sure you can tell from my tone, the M1 KVT isn't the best premium in War Thunder. It certainly isn't worth $60 compared to the Terms, ZTZ or the Leopard 2 Panzer Battalion. Those tanks have far better value for money, the German and Soviet tech trees have better teams and lineups, and while China isn't currently a meta nation, they have a fun top tier lineup that is well worth the grind. Is the M1 KVT a bad tank? No. It's a decent as a support vehicle, and if you want to play it, just grind out the tech tree M1 Abrams. It's literally the same tank, and while it may cost you your sanity grinding it, it at least isn't going to cost you $60. Anyway lads, if you're still listening at this point, thank you. It means a lot that you've taken a part of your day to listen to this unhinged rant about a fictional tank. If you like my content, please do consider leaving a like and subscribing, and be sure to let me know down below in the comment section what vehicle you guys would like to see me review next. As always, a big thank you to all my YouTube members who really do help the channel and help me grow. But again, finally lads, a big thank you, and I'll see you in the next video.